Okay, so one of our listeners, I don't want to say who, but he'll know exactly who he is because this story is about him. But so he was driving down the road, not the road, he was on the highway, dude. He was on an interstate going through the middle of a city, right? And I don't know what happened, but some dude behind him or whatever thought that he had cut him off. And this guy hadn't. He's like, dude, I don't drive like that. I didn't cut him off. I saw him, whatever. So the dude whips out, gets in front of him, slams on the brakes on the interstate to a dead stop. And, this is an interstate. Luckily, there wasn't much traffic. But anyway, so the guy takes off. He doesn't get out of the car. But my buddy, it was like his wife was with him. He's like, am I going to have to throw down with this dude? So he takes off and, he just floors it, gets out. The guy, who slammed on his brake floors it. He exits. And it just turns out he exited right where our listener exited. And they pull up to the same light together, right next to each other. And the guy won't look over at him. And when he pulled up right next to him, he was like, okay, I may have to get it on, So the good dude turns off. The listener, he keeps going, goes home. And it turns out he had to get back out like almost immediately. I think he was returning something. And he turns down this road and he sees that truck parked in front of the parole office. Same truck parked in front of the parole office. So he goes and does what he did. He drops off whatever he needs to drop off. And he starts thinking about it. He goes back to the parole office and he's like, he goes in, the truck's gone. He goes in, he's like, hey, the person who's driving that truck, yeah, who is he? I'm like, well, he's a parolee checking in. He's like, well, here's what just happened. He was driving very aggressively, all this stuff. And they were like, well, do you want to file a report or a informal or formal report? He goes, I'll file an informal report for now. And then after he left, he was like, maybe I'll just go back and file a formal report. Because this dude's a felon, who's out of jail on parole and nearly causing accidents by coming to a complete stop on the interstate. And that just goes to show you, dude. I mean, because this guy, this listener, I don't know how many fights he's been in, but he could scrap. He's a big dude. Like he's 6'6", wiry, strong, played college basketball, and he could mess somebody up. I guarantee you. And it's like, man, you never know who you're messing with. That's why I said I don't try not to road rage, dude, because you don't know who you're messing with. And that's another reason I've started carrying everywhere I go, so I don't road rage. Because, dude, what are you going to do? Road rage get, over something stupid, somebody cutting you off, getting a fight, and you got a gun on you? No. Because what do we said? When that bullet leaves that barrel, you're responsible for it, no matter what happens. And it ain't worth it over something stupid, I mean, I just don't road rage anymore. I'll get angry, maybe yell, but I don't floor it or try to do anything with my automobile, because that automobile, Josh, that's as or more of a deadly weapon than a firearm on a road. For everybody in the audience, Josh has just decided he's going to text all his friends during this recording. So he didn't hear a word I said. He's probably going to start talking about Cookie Crisp or something. And his phone, and they're texting him back too.
So no, I listened to what you said. Absolutely. Come on. You think I don't listen to you?
That was funny.
What are you, crazy? That was kind of funny. I don't road rage either, right? Because that exact same reason. Because you see these people now. You see, there's videos on X every day of somebody road raging, and next thing you know, they road rage on somebody, and then that other person gets out of the car with a gun, and you just don't know who you're dealing with. People are crazy, right? The world is full of crazy. Now, I will absolutely get upset, and I will MF you from the inside of my car. And I will, I'll certainly do that, but I'm not, I'm not going to turn my car into a weapon. And I'm not going to, run up on you and ride your bumper or honk and flip you off and stuff like, like you said, you don't know who you're dealing with. And you're absolutely right. Once that gun comes out, it depending upon where you live, you could be charged with escalating that, and then your inherent right to self-defense is gone. If you initiated it and you caused that situation to escalate like that, now you put yourself in legal jeopardy. So, yeah, it's just it's not. man, it's not worth it. You got to step back, and I'm guilty of it too. It, but you got to step back and ask yourself, is this the hill I'm willing to die on? Literally, uh, because it's just not worth it.
And I kind of do agree with that. You said something about, you are armed, right? The state, I believe, puts a little bit more onus on the person who is armed versus unarmed, right? You were armed. You knew you had that deadly force, but you chose to escalate and take it to that level, right? And, I don't know the legalities of all that, but I do like the idea that, hey, there's a certain amount of responsibility that comes with carrying a firearm on you. I do agree with that. In fact, I might say it's well regulated.
No, you're responsible. You're responsible for that firearm, and like you said, you're responsible for where every single round goes when you fire it. You are accountable for every single one. We learned that a long time ago. Day one, you're accountable, and so you just can't go, willy nilly, blasting into the ether. Um, so
Yeah, a cop
I,
cop told me a few weeks ago. He is a guy who's been in the force forever. Man, he's been in for over 30 years. He's a chief deputy, and he laid out a scenario that he gives to folks in the academy. And he lays out this scenario. I'll trash it if I try to recreate it. But he follows a person like Joe Schmo through a series of things that look like crimes. Like, for example, it starts out like this. Joe Schmo is walking down the street. His car broke down. He's walking down the street. It starts hailing, like big hail, like baseball size hail. The only way he can get out of it is to kick down the door of a residence and get in from the hail. Is that a crime?
I don't know.
Kind of seems like it, doesn't it?
Yeah,
But this deputy was like, well, according to Texas law, everything is about intent. By kicking down the door, his intent wasn't to steal anything or to damage property. His intent was to get out of a potentially deadly situation. So at that point, a crime hadn't been committed. Then he goes through this litany of stuff that Joe Schmo does inside this house. And, you'll come to one point, is that a crime? Well, at one point, another person enters the picture, is in the house with Joe Schmo, grabs a gun, and chases Joe Schmo out and starts firing. Now, this is a neighborhood with houses on either end of the street. Fires at Joe Schmo, fleeing the scene. Is that a crime? Because Joe Schmo had actually, at that point, actually stolen something. So, is that a crime? Well, there is a crime that was committed because that guy was indiscriminately firing in a neighborhood. Well, he was firing toward homes, that are on either end of the street. He's like, that's a crime.
yeah,
That's reckless endangerment. Even if you're firing at somebody, especially that's running away. Right. So it's like,
yeah.
you really got to think about this stuff. Like if somebody's trying to break in your house and they're out front, maybe the best thing is to go out the back door, make sure your family is in the bulletproof part of the house and shoot into your own house. you know?
uh, it's yeah, so it varies by state, right? When it comes down to some of this stuff, and it gets very, very nuanced. So, in North Carolina, you cannot shoot somebody in your driveway who is trying to steal your car. Let's say in the middle of the night, your dog's barking. You flip the lights on, you go out there, and somebody is breaking into your car. You cannot shoot them. It's right. It's wild. Now they come in your house, all bets are off. It's fair game. Um, if they are running away from you, you cannot shoot them. If they are trespassing on your property, you cannot shoot them.
Huh.
Yeah,
What?
in North Carolina.
Well, so in Holland, when I lived there, there's a very interesting law in the books that goes back to the 1700s that if somebody breaks into your house, right, you cannot do anything. You can't physically, nothing. Because if they get hurt, that's on you. In your own house, they could be stealing everything now. The trick is, if they set foot on the stairs to go up, you can use deadly force. If they set foot on the stairs. You have any idea why that might be?
No.
It's because for years in Holland, and this is, I believe, still on the books there. Your property tax is based on the footprint of your home. It's not based on how high the home is. So since the 16th, 17th century, that's been on the laws in Holland. So that's why when you see, you know, the big cities in Holland, you'll see these very narrow homes, very, very narrow, but they're like 5 stories tall. So the tradition was you don't live on the first level. Nothing's all, you know, generally there's nothing on the first level. The living quarters are up one level. Generally, kitchen is downstairs, but the living quarters are upstairs. So if somebody sets foot on the stairs, that signals intent to, you know, harm possibly, you know, someone in their living spaces, right? So you're authorized to use authorized. You can use deadly force. But with what? It's very difficult to, I guess a bat maybe, but it's very difficult to get any weapon in Holland. Well, it was when I was there anyway.
Yeah, I was just about to ask how many folks in Europe have yeet cannons in their houses. Um,
Well, in
you know,
Switzerland,
especially in Switzerland, yeah. Um, start talking about the Netherlands and France and Germany. Well, I guess some people may have shotguns.
yeah,
If they're allowed.
In Germany, quite a few. Well, it's not like the U.S., of course, but Germany, it is possible. The Balkans, a lot of people have hunting rifles. Uh, well, in the civilized Balkans, I should say. But yeah, man, a lot of AK-47s in Ukraine, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. A lot of Russians in Ukraine, uh, too.
So
So,
yeah, that's disappeared from the news, huh?
well, nobody cares, dude. Nobody cares about it anymore. I mean, even so everybody cared about it because they were told to care about it. You know, they were told to care about it in 2014 when Putin invaded Ukraine, but then, of course, then they were told to care about it when he continued, and then it was kind of overmasked or overcome by the October 7th, we could just well, I'd say celebrate. We just passed the anniversary of the attack in Israel, and so that kind of put it into that pushed it further down the news cycle, and even the Israel Gaza news has kind of got pushed down the news cycle. Now it's Israel, dude, they're flattening southern Lebanon and southern Beirut, uh, killing the leader of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, which was massive. I saw that. I was like, ooh, man. But we have gone full Leroy Jenkins on this. And then they killed the 2IC. And when they killed the 2IC, they killed I saw where they killed a Quds Force general. I think he was one of he was like either the 1IC or the 2IC of the Quds Force, because they were, he was hanging out in the bunker with the guy who had just taken over for Nasrallah. It was like, man, dude, they're zero chill in the Israeli Defense Force right now, none whatsoever. And they just came out and said that they're not releasing their plans to attack Iran proper to the United States, which is pretty big. But
Well,
I'm glad the adults are in charge.
I would imagine that could mean a lot of different things, of course. But maybe they'll hit the nuclear facilities. I don't know. There's an island just there in the Gulf. I read about it. There's an island that Iran owns where it's something like 95% of their exported oil goes through. To be, it's a transfer station, in other words. And it's like, man, you could hit that, but that might, that would probably throw more chaos into the mix that, well, I don't, maybe not, but hitting their nuclear facilities, I mean, that's kind of a win. That doesn't affect anything. Iran's demonstrated that they don't have much bite. I mean, so far to hit Israel, not much bite at all.
No, they did the night of missiles, which I think it came back. The only person who got killed was that Palestinian guy in the West Bank. Did you see the missile? The part of it had been hit by the Iron Dome, and then like half of it fell out of the sky and fell right on top of this dude, just smushed him, just straight like Super Mario jumping on a Goomba. It
Yeah, that
was
was crazy.
dude. That was nuts, man. That dude's out for his evening walk, and next thing you know, you got half a body of a missile falling on you, just smushing you. That was that was pretty wild. Um,
A lot of
but
people who think that they're sane or think that they're reasonable would say what I'm about to say is crazy. But I've heard, and I was thinking about it last night. I'm like, that's not a bad idea. I've heard that right now is actually a great time to go to Israel as a tourist. Believe it or not, because there's very little tourists there right now, but all the sites are still open. Everything's still open. You know,
oh yeah,
you're risking a little bit staying in Tel Aviv. But man, I mean, I bet airfare's real cheap right
yeah,
now.
yeah, that's
No,
true. Well, I
no
mean,
pressing crowds, all that stuff.
yeah, I mean, you're risking a little bit staying in Tel Aviv, but at the end of the day, I mean, even they launched how many missiles the other night, and the Iron Dome caught almost all of them.
Yeah,
Along with we had our cruisers, out in the Med that were, they were helping out, shooting those things down. But yeah, I mean, what are the chances of them doing that again? You probably got a better chance of getting blown up by a suicide bomber on a bus. Just stay out. I wouldn't take a bus. Um, yeah, because they've got everything pretty much locked down. But no, it's a good point. Maybe
yeah,
I'll
you
plan
never know.
I need another vacation. Maybe I
Well,
might do a
I
vacation to Israel.
I do want to go to Israel. That's one of my bucket list things. I
Same.
got to go to Israel, and it's like, well, it's never going to be a really great time to go. But
No.
I'll tell you, if Iran actually develops a nuclear, warhead, it's one thing to do a test. It's another thing to miniaturize it and put it on a warhead to where you've got, multiple kilotons, hopefully megatons. I don't think they'll have that capability, but if they have the ability to put a warhead on top of one of those missiles that fell out of the sky and hit that dude, that's even a riskier time to go. But
Yeah.
I don't know. And did you see Kamala Harris? Oh my God. We'll talk about this a little bit. I mean, she's just, oh my goodness. But the other day, who was she? It was 60 Minutes. The interview was 60 Minutes, which was
Yeah.
atrocious. And I tend to think that that's the end of the campaign, and that's we can talk about that a little later. But when he asked her who is basically the biggest threat to the United States, and she kind of didn't hesitate. She said Iran, and it's like, oh my God, oh my God, you just Iran, not Russia. She would have said Russia, I still would have rolled my eyes, but at least Russia's got the largest nuclear arsenal in the world.
Yeah.
And then us with our China thing, we've talked about that over and over. But Iran, really? No, no.
Yeah. I saw it, and dude, it was bad, especially when they asked her, like, okay, so what would be the difference between your administration and the Biden administration? It was like, okay, well, she's part of the Biden administration, but whatever. We're splitting hairs here. And she was like, well, I'm not Joe Biden, so there's that. And I was like, okay. Well, what else? And then she went on to say that she was part of all the decisions of the Biden administration. And you're like, okay, so we're going to have the Biden administration again. Dude, when she is off the teleprompter, she is atrocious. Just absolutely atrocious. Uh, but she owns a Glock, though. That was best. Like, you're like, well, yeah, I mean, I own a Glock. If you're if you're listening to this and you're ever going to run for office and somebody asks you if you own a firearm, like the only appropriate response to that is yes, I do. And then you drop an ad like the next day or within like 48 hours of you at the range with said firearm, covering the four fundamentals of firearm safety, and then mag dumping into your target, and then turn around and be like, any questions? Like that's the appropriate response. Well, yeah, I'm just like law enforcement. I own a Glock. It's like I bet you don't, and I bet. And if you had it in California, is it California compliant?
No, it's not, because Glocks. I don't think you can have a Glock in California because of the quote unquote safety. Yes, I know Glock has 3 safeties, but
Yeah.
according to California, it's got. I think you cannot have a Glock now. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I bet we have a grand total of 0 listeners in California, but I think I read that yeah, you can't have a Glock, and that's like a law that's been on the books for a while. So it's like, okay, where'd you get the Glock? Do you have it at the Naval Observatory? Are you even allowed? I, yeah, dumb answer. And just one simple follow up could have just torched that. It's like, oh really? What model or what caliber? Anything. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, it's I don't know, Josh. I don't know if you probably don't want to jump into it, but part I'm I'm seeing her campaign really in the crapper. It doesn't look good.
No. I the and I don't know because I haven't been following the polling. Honestly, man, I have tried not to pay attention to the campaign stuff for the last couple of really the last week. Plus, I was out of town and everything, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And I just kind of unplugged from the campaign stuff because it's so tiresome, right? You have Kamala Harris, who is probably one of the dumbest elected officials we have outside of maybe Hirono. Um, and she's completely unlikable. The honeymoon, which I didn't think was going to end. I thought they were going to keep that thing going, all the way to election day. It seems that the honeymoon is over. The media appears to be, and I think it was you that said it. The media appears to be kind of checked out on Kamala Harris by and large. That's why she's going on Stern. That's why she's going on Colbert. She's trying to find these other venues because the media has not, painted her as the darling, time and time again, like I think she hoped for. And then, then you have Big DJ T on the other hand, who can't get out of his own way. It's like, dude, and the whole Logan act aside, which I think because that's ridiculous, but it's like, why you have two image problems, right? Donald Trump has two image problems. One is racism. The other is Russia. I'm not saying he's a racist before anybody tries to come at me, but that's something that has plagued him since he declared himself a candidate in 2016. Right? That is something that people have attached to him, and he has fought and fought and fought. Everything. So like he should be very, very well polished by this point on how to deal with that stuff, right? And to be like, okay, I need to avoid these landmines. And your other one is Russia, right? And we all know the whole Russia collusion was propaganda. It was made up by the left and some on the right. Knowing that you have this image problem, why the f are you calling Putin? But why would you like? Why? Why? All you're doing is you're giving ammo to your opponents. Why would you do that? This dude can't get out of his own way, which it drives me nuts. But back to Kamala, I think her campaign, if what I read today, and I think Roger shared some of it as well, dude. If the poll coming out of Wisconsin saying that they're tied or DJT's a couple points up is true, she's in trouble. She's in real trouble because for her to be down in Wisconsin, that's massive. If that poll is true, that is massive, and that would lead me to believe that it's going to be that it would be a bloodbath, and if it's like that in Wisconsin, Michigan's going to be a bloodbath, right? Same thing through the Rust Belt.
It sure seems that way. Just lately, I've been getting, and I know what you're saying. We've talked about it over and over about the hijinks that are going to go on probably 2 weeks after the November 5th. So you're looking at like, third week of November before I'm predicting before you'll know some states, particularly Pennsylvania. I think it'll take Pennsylvania a full 10 days to come out and certify whatever they do.
Yep.
And that leaves a lot of room for the hijinks. But that said, I've been saying since, for a while now, it's going to take them not turning out, Democrats not turning out to vote, and it's going to take a real wave of Republicans, or Trump voters coming out and voting, like to the tune of 80 million. It's going to have to be something like that. What I'm seeing now, what I'm sensing is a lot of Hillary Clinton vibes, same type of vibes as 2016. Not, just that, man, people don't like her. People do not, they don't hate Kamala Harris, but they don't like her. There's no energy there. There's nothing there. It's an empty suit. I think that there's going to be this hidden female vote that just that catty vote. I heard somebody in the workplace who I know is a liberal slip up at work and say, "I can't vote for her. She's an idiot."
Really?
Yeah, I put that in the text. It's nice to know you read all the text messages from other people during the podcast, but you don't read mine. But of course, I did probably send it at 1 in the morning. But
it was probably also when I woke up and there were 98 text messages.
Could have been that
in our group. I was like,
can't believe you missed it. But I don't know, man. I don't want to get excited about it because I've been wrong. I was wrong in 2020. I was wrong in 90. No, I was wrong in 2020. I was wrong in 2012. And I don't know if I could be completely reading the tea leaves wrong, but to Trump's credit, like the call to Putin aside, the campaign itself is running very smoothly right now. He's doing everything he needs to do, or the campaign is anyway. So kudos to whoever's running this campaign, because it's a heck of a lot better than 2016 or 2020. It's better than both of those. And 2020 was horrible. So,
campaign
I don't know. I want to get hopeful, but man, everybody's just got to get out. Everybody's got to get out and actually vote. And even Trump now is saying, vote early, vote now, do it now. You never know what's going to happen. You got those counties in North Carolina, Josh, and then now you got Florida this close to the election,
Yeah, so there's a lot of questions going around in Western North Carolina how they're going to vote, because there's still places that don't have power, and so electronic voting machines not going to work. And then how do you get to those people who are isolated? Mail truck's not running out there. How are these people going to get out to to vote? And North Carolina hasn't figured that out. And I'm not going to go all. I'm not going to say that they're intentionally, going to deprive those people of an opportunity to vote, but they're not going out of their way to, get that framework in place to to help those people to vote. They're certainly not. They're moving at the speed of molasses in the wintertime. And not good. Florida's about to be in the same boat. Kind of pun intended. But the good thing about Florida is, it's not mountainous, obviously, and folks, you'll be able to get to folks a lot quicker and get things, taken care of, because you're going to have some bridges and stuff that wash out, but you're not going to have the number of bridges that washed out in Western North Carolina. Over 300 bridges gone. Because everywhere, it's obviously it's the mountains. So everywhere you turn around, there's a bridge, and so speaking of, Florida's Milton's moving in tonight. It's supposed to make landfall, I think, soon, if it hasn't already. I think it weakened a little bit down to a Cat 3, which is good, because it got up to a 5 out there in the Gulf, and dude, they said it had wind gusts well over 200 miles an hour, with sustained winds at like around 185. Bro, that's legit. That's a legit storm.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about hurricanes. A little bit, but not a whole lot. I bet that Florida will probably be fine. I'm hoping it'll be fine, and it'll be more fine than North Carolina and some of those other areas because they have the infrastructure to recover quicker. Uh,
Yeah,
because I mean, that was a black swan event up there in Western North Carolina. It's a black swan. It's like I always said, probably said on this podcast before. You travel south of I-20, and if there's an ice storm down there in Texas, it's a standstill because they haven't invested in the infrastructure to get rid of ice and snow because it hardly ever freaking happens. Now up
yep,
here north, yes, there's the infrastructure. There's the salting machines, the the plows that clear everything out. But south, no, because it never happens, and it would be
yeah,
foolish. It would be foolish to invest in that type of infrastructure,
yep,
because then you got to maintain it and all that kind of stuff. So I think Florida will recover quicker, man. But man, a lot of people evacuated from the Tampa area, a lot.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, one of our faithful listeners, Gary, evacuated. It took him a while to get from, the Tampa area up to the Panhandle with his wife and mom and son and dog and stuff. And I'm glad you made it up there, Gary. And hope everybody's doing okay. Hope your house and everything, weathers through it. But as a native Floridian, hurricanes, that's just part of life. Um, and we haven't seen. I think 2005 was actually 2004, 2005 was the worst years for hurricanes in Florida. Just because they had so many big, big ones. Katrina, because a lot of people probably may have forgotten. Katrina raised across Florida before it went into New Orleans. Um, so it made landfall twice, which is not always the case with these things, but with the hurricane stuff, it's one of those cat 1 to cat 3, like everybody's like, oh, we're gonna have a party. It's like, yeah, we may be without power for a couple days. I remember Hurricane Kate when I was a kid. We were out power. I don't think we had power for like 2 weeks. And Dad's little generator that ran the refrigerator and his coffee pot, but it wouldn't run the AC. And I forget when it hit. But it was it's warm in Florida except for like January and February. But yeah, so the hurricane stuff. But man, when you start talking 4s and 5s though, and that's a whole different ball game. So I went through Andrew. I rode out Andrew in South Florida when it was a 5. I will never ride out a 5. Like part of me is always like, I'm a Floridian. I'll stay. I'll put that Salt Life sticker on the back of my on the back of my car and stay. Like, oh, this is a 5. Yeah, man, we're gonna pack it up and leave, because when you see telephone poles going sideways down the street, like that's no joke. It's like Ron White said, it's not that the wind is blowing, it's what the wind is blowing. Um, that makes those things bad. But obviously nobody's going to hear this down there until after the hurricane will be long gone. It depends on when our production team can get it out. But we're praying everybody makes it through, and everybody's okay. At the end of the day, property and stuff can be replaced, but you can't. So stay safe, stay frosty out there to those down in Florida going through this thing. We have a lot of listeners in the in Central Florida, and I was texting with Joe earlier. Joe's at his father-in-law's place out in Central Florida, Central Southern Florida, out in the swamps, man, like in the swamps. That's God's country out there. He sent me some pictures, and so Joe, yeah, man, you'll hear this. You guys stay safe, man, out there.
One of the things that's blowing my mind with this is the amount of people on X who are talking about weather manipulation, specifically dropping dry ice, and it's possible to generate a hurricane. And we can talk about this in a sec. We can talk more about weather manipulation, but I don't think people truly realize the amount of force it takes to generate something like a hurricane. It's akin to an earthquake. Well, no, obviously it's easier to generate an earthquake than it is a freaking hurricane. That's the whole of nature basically cleansing itself and taking a dump. Basically, I feel a little not balanced out quite right. When nature's not balanced out, hurricanes happen. And to balance
So
everything out, it's a cleansing thing that nature does. And the fact that people think that it's possible to generate something like that, I'm sorry, dude, that's too far. That's too far. It's like, okay, no, idiot, mute.
I I saw that, and they're based, in some of these people, and I try and think about, okay, what, like, how do you get there, like, mentally, how do you get there? And I saw some people use, when they were questioned on it, were like, well, how do you think that happens? How do you think that we can do that? And they go, well, I mean, we can see clouds and make it rain. It's like, that's completely, like, completely different. Like, not even remotely, not even remotely the same thing. That's like saying, well, ice cream is soft and ketchup is basically a liquid, so it's the same. They're the same. It's like, no, 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 they're not. It's would be like, okay, so you think, is it the Jewish space laser that can create hurricanes out of a thunderstorm? You think that's how that works? And this is not something that is new, right? I mean, hurricanes have existed ever since the Earth existed. They were here long before we were. They'll be here, long after we're not. And then other people are, saying, well, it was intentionally created to interfere with the election. And at that point, like, man, again, you're right. You just have to mute people. At that point, you're just like, you're getting muted or blocked, because I just can't.
To whose benefit? It's like,
Yeah,
cui bono on that. Like, who benefits from that? I have seen in the late '90s. I don't remember what year it was, but I was a lifeguard, and out in Amarillo, Texas, they were cloud seeding. I watched it happen. It went from a clear sky, and these planes, they were high up. I don't know how high. I don't know, 15, 20,000 feet, pretty high.
Snoop Dogg, huh?
And I could see it, and they contrail go by. I was like, that looks a little different. It's expanding. It's not going away. And then the plane would come back and forth and back and forth. And I sat there and watched over the course of hours the sky cloud up, and it actually sprinkled. So yeah, I mean, I've seen it happen.
Well, I mean, they just had that flood in Dubai. Well, I mean, I guess I'd say they just had it. It's been probably, been some months back that, they cloud seeded, and it rained so much it flooded. So I get cloud seeding, right? I completely, yeah, man, we can absolutely do that. Um, but we can't create hurricanes. Like, that's not a thing. It's like you said, it's like creating an earthquake. It's like, so you think we're out there, like, is it a bunch of people jumping up and down on one side of the San Andreas fault to get that tectonic plate to move to create that earthquake? Like what do you like?
Well,
How do you think we're creating earthquakes?
so
Uh,
we are creating earthquakes with the fracking stuff. That's happening, but it's not intentional.
yes,
It's
yes,
like you don't want that to happen. You don't
no,
want. Well, maybe you. I don't know. Maybe you do, but when they happen, it's not intentional. So they are pumping, and they're pumping all this fluid into these rocks and cause them to explode. And occasionally, I guess there'll be a cave in or something. I don't know, but there are earthquakes. We do cause those. Because, dude, I mean, there was one the other day hit down about 90 miles south of here, around Midland, and we felt it. We felt it up here. It was a big one. Uh, it did, it did, it didn't shake anything loose, but you could hear dishes ting 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 ting. So, and that's got to be the fracking. It's got to be. And like all those earthquakes in Oklahoma, good lord, man, there's a ton of them. Go to U.S. Geological Survey, USGS,
really.
and yeah, and look at all the dang earthquakes in Oklahoma. They're not. None
I
of them are
haven't.
big. None of them are big.
Sure.
Around 3.8, 4.3, but yeah, it's kind of crazy. But yeah, intentionally create, like, the book State of Fear by Michael Crichton. Really good book. I recommend y'all read it. It's about ecoterrorism and stuff like that. And the afterword to that book is one of the greatest arguments against, you know, against man-made climate change you'll ever read. It's amazing. It's Crichton's view of this whole climate change thing. And anyway, in that book, these eco-terrorists are trying to cause an earthquake in the Pacific to cause a tsunami and all this stuff. So, you know, he lays it out like a Crichton book would, but he also writes about time travel and bringing dinosaurs back and something like that. So
You did it, crazy bastard! You did it.
well, I'd say it'd be easier to, let's go through the list. It would be easier to replicate a dinosaur from DNA than to create a hurricane. It would be easier to cause an earthquake on the San Andreas Fault or wherever than it would be to cause a hurricane. I will say that time travel might be harder than creating a hurricane. I think that if we had the ability, I don't even know about that, man. I don't know. Time travel is possible. It's absolutely possible.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Backwards.
Yeah, backwards. Not forward. So you brought up climate change, right? So that's another thing that is all over, all the social media timelines, because we just had Hurricane Helene, and obviously Hurricane Helene did some pretty significant damage, up through Georgia, but really obviously in Western North Carolina is where it's probably felt the hardest. And now Milton's right on the heels of that. And at one point, some meteorologists, tracking Milton dropped down, I forget how many millibars, but it was like 800 in the low 890s. All right. And so those don't know, the lower the millibars, the stronger the hurricane. And very few get below 900. Even fewer. There's only been a couple that have dropped below 890. I mean, when you start talking about, you get a hurricane in the 880s, like that is a massive, massive storm. And one of them made the comment that at one point Milton was approaching the strongest storm that the Earth could produce, right? The strongest storm that was even scientifically possible based on what the Earth can produce. And of course, everybody went crazy. Oh, this is climate change. Give the government more of your money, so so the hurricanes will stop. And got to talking, talk to a few folks, and they were like, "Oh, I don't believe the climate is changing. The climate's not changing. The climate's not changing." A couple of them were like, "Yeah, the climate's changing. It's our fault." Blah blah. So let me ask you this: is the climate changing?
Yes.
I agree. I don't think it's man-made. I don't think it's because of us, but I certainly 100% believe the climate is changing. And I mean, and that data is there, that the climate is, definitely changing, but I don't think it's man-made. I just think it's just the Earth going through its natural cycles as it's done since the beginning of time.
Even if, like, there's a difference between climate and weather, of course. There
Yes.
is. And it's a fact that there's I can't remember the term. I should have taken an alpha brain before this. I didn't know we were going to talk about climate change. It's one of my favorite subjects to debate. But there's a phenomenon that happens where it is definitely hotter in cities than it is in rural areas. Right? Sure. It is. And it's reflective heat and, the proximity of buildings and all this stuff, and it holds more heat than the dirt does or rock or whatever. So, but does that change climate? I don't know. It changes a microclimate for sure. It can, but that's not climate as a whole. I've told this story maybe way early in the podcast, but you can shut me down if you're tired of hearing this story. When I went on that exercise and I had to sit next to the staff weather officer for 12 hours a day and I had nothing to do.
Tell it.
So this dude, he was a staff weather officer. He was a reservist out of Florida. And I had nothing to do in this exercise. There was nothing scripted for what I did, but I had to be there. It was that kind of thing. and they get paid me overtime for it. It was 12-hour shifts. And I was just like, okay. Well, so I had brought some good books to read. I read about the history of salt. That's how bored I was. I read a book about the history of salt. But anyway, this staff weather officer, his day job, he was a NASA meteorologist. I was like, oh, you're a NASA weatherman. And he's like, no, I'm a meteorologist. I'm not the guy on TV that shows what front is coming in and what day it's going to rain. This dude had a PhD in advanced applied mathematics and all this stuff. He's a mathematician because, predicting weather is actually really tough. And a lot of it's all data driven and what's happened in the past and all this stuff. And the more data you have, the better it is. And he gave me a big, long explanation on, we talk, again, 12 hours a day for 10 days. We're mainly talking about, climate and weather. And he's like us. He's like, look, yes, the climate is changing. It's always changed. But the problem is the data. We don't have enough data to determine what's even causing the change to begin with. We can look at geological data and make inferences from that, but it's not necessarily causality. For example, he's like, we can't measure certain things. We don't have instruments, sensitive enough to measure certain things. Now, there was an event back in one of the geological eras. It basically changed the face of the planet. It was a mass extinction event. It wasn't a volcano. It didn't kill everything, but it killed entire species, things like that, right? And this cataclysmic event took place over 1.5 million years. There's these large igneous formations in Russia that have a lot of gas trapped in them. Under the right circumstances, that gas is slowly released into the atmosphere. This is massive fields, right? Massive, half the continent. Well, these large igneous fields were releasing this gas, and it just eventually made the planet uninhabitable for certain species of animals. So there was a mass extinction event over 1.5 million years. He's like, look, something like that could be going on right now, and we'd have no way to tell. We'd have no way to tell because it's just happening so slowly, right? So he's like, you just got to go off the data, and to make any determinations that it's changing rapidly is just not possible. And then he went into the whole thing about why it's such big business, why it's such a big movement, man-made climate change. But I can get into that in a minute. But I just think that, Josh, as human beings, we're so anthropocentric, thinking about ourselves and not like this planet as a living thing that's way bigger and more powerful than us that we could even comprehend,
Yeah. And I was always kind of on the fence. And mainly a lot of it was because it was being shoved down my throat. So that automatically, when something gets shoved down my throat, like my defense mechanism is, completely ignore it. And
that's not what I heard.
That was good. Hey man, I threw up that softball for you. There you go. So, people demand that you believe something automatically. It's like you be like, the sky is blue. Sky is blue. You will believe it. I'll be like, okay, well, I'm not going to just because you told me I have to. And really, it was, I forget the guy's name who was on Steve Koonin, who went on Rogan. And so this guy is, he's a doctor. He has a doctorate rather, and he was the former chief scientist for British Petroleum. And he lays it out in his book, really well. And he breaks it down and dumbs it down to where, even I can understand it about how, the climate's changing. And he laid out, kind of like some of the things that you did. Look, you go back and look at all the geological periods and you can see the earth has gone through cycles. They found a village in the Norwegian mountains after a glacier melted. And so, it's like, well, guess what? That glacier wasn't there at one point, obviously. And then it was. And now it's not. And when this when this glacier melted, it didn't melt yesterday, it didn't melt 20 years ago. It had melted thousands of years ago, when they found this thing. And so, you know and he also talked about how arrogant are we to go and build cities on the shoreline around the world, when for all of mankind and all of human history, people have been nomadic. People have had to move with the weather. You know, even there was points where even the Vikings didn't live right on the coast. They had to move inland because of these events. Um, people had to move. People had to move. Oh, it's wintertime. Well, this is unsustainable. We can't live here, right? We have to move because this is now untenable. Um, and then he breaks down. He's like, how arrogant are we to think that we can just build right on the water, and then when these things happen, and he brought up Katrina as an example, Hurricane Katrina as an example. Everybody was like, I can't believe this happened. It's like you built a city in a bowl. Like, it is below sea level, and it's right on the Gulf of Mexico. Like, it's literally on the water, and all you have is a bank of dirt protecting it. And then you can't believe how this would happen. And he really broke it down. It was really good, because people keep using the whole, well, hurricanes are getting more expensive. Okay. Well, I would totally expect a hurricane in 1920, to be less expensive, as far as the damage that it does, than a hurricane in 2020, because the amount of people who lived on that coastline in 1920, probably a lot less than the people who live on that coastline in 2020. You know, And so, all these metrics he brought up, he broke them down. This is how, this is this is the flaws with what the left is saying. And he didn't couch it as, the left or the right. He was just, people who say it's man-made, people who think that, humans are driving climate change, versus, hey man, this is the natural cycle of the earth.
Yeah.
You know, and then he even, he brought up one of his detractors, and Joe Rogan actually did an interview with that guy. I forget his name.
Oh, I
And Joe
remember
Rogan
that.
said, "Hey, Steve Coonan said that he would be more than happy to come on at the same time, and you guys debate live, on the podcast." And the guy was like, "I'm not doing that. Absolutely, I'm not doing that." And Rogan kind of pressed him a little bit. Remember that? And he was
Yeah.
like, "Well, why not, man? Like, if you're good on your data." Because Steve Coonan was like, "Yeah, I'll absolutely do it. I got no problem debating that guy." And he broke down the flaws and the other dude's findings, if you will.
Well,
But
yeah.
yeah,
It's this dude who I was talking to, the NASA meteorologist. He's like, look, I'm totally open that the man-made climate change could be a thing, but there's simply not enough data for me to say one way or the other, is what he was saying. And
right,
by saying that, he's like, there's no way to tell, and we haven't been here long enough. But one of his big things, and I kind of said it earlier with hurricanes, we talk a lot about hurricanes. I'll give you some background of why NASA needs a meteorologist, right? So meteorologists, why? So the rocket can take off or the shuttle can take off. And that's what he was really worried about, because Josh, this was back in the day. It's 2010-ish, 2010, 2011. That's around the time we got rid of the space shuttles.
yeah,
And he was about to lose his job because they're getting rid of the space shuttles. And that's what he did. He did the weather for the shuttle takeoff, right? And there's another weather officer that once that thing leaves the pad, another weather officer takes over. And the reason that is because you're always hearing about you used to always hear about shuttle launches being being delayed, right?
yeah.
And but but they're showing a picture of the shuttle there in Cape Canaveral, and the weather's clear, and you're like, what's going on? Why is it delayed? Well, because when the shuttle takes off, there are 3 places on the planet where the weather has to be perfect, just in case the shuttle has to abort. They can, because of the trajectories and stuff, they can land. It's somewhere over, I want to say it's in Turkey, and I don't even know where the other one is. I can't remember. But the weather's got to be perfect in 3 places: Cape Canaveral, I think it's in Turkey somewhere, and then I don't know where else. Maybe China or something.
Huh?
Maybe it's
I,
Kazakhstan or something like
I didn't
that.
know that.
So if they'd abort, boom, they just go over there to land, hopefully. But geez, what a long shot. So yeah, that was his job, and we talked a lot about hurricanes because Florida gets hit by hurricanes. He lived there, all that stuff. And I said it earlier that hurricanes are a cleansing process. When something's out of balance, if it's too hot in one area, too cold in another, you're going to get some hurricanes because it's going to it balances stuff out. It's right along, it's not just hurricanes, it's cyclones and typhoons. I guess typhoons over in the Pacific. But if you look, it's like, okay, maybe that's true, Luke. Maybe it's not. But one thing that's really not being covered or talked about at all is that this year, what used to be called, the Northwestern Passage. So you got the Labrador Sea, Baffin Bay, over to the Beaufort Sea. It's like north of Canada. Is starting to freeze up. It's starting to freeze up now. Like now, it's only October and it's starting to freeze up. It's usually open until late November. Like the icebreakers can get through there, but they're like, this is really early for this to be freezing up. It's like, well, maybe, this giant climate that's, of our northern, far northern hemisphere is getting colder earlier. Maybe nature's trying to balance itself out, whatever. I'm just saying there's a lot of causes to these things. It goes back to thinking that we can control that and create the conditions to make a freaking hurricane. So stupid. Oh. Again, it's that arrogance and that anthropocentric mindset that we can actually control something on this planet. Whatever, dude.
Yeah.
Oh, cause a volcano to erupt. Would that be easier or harder than creating a hurricane?
I think that'd be much easier.
Roger not being a bitch. Easier or harder than causing a hurricane?
Oh, much harder.
Harder.
We could create 1,000 hurricanes before he stops that.
Be living in alternate multiverses before Roger stops being a bitch.
Fact.
I mean, name it. I mean, it's so staying on hurricanes. There's I was talking to a buddy, and I remember I was telling you before we started recording, I got really worked up about something the other night. So worked up that I had to start texting some other buddies who were actually awake. But I couldn't remember what it was. I was like, it'd be a great thing to talk about the podcast, but I can't remember what I got worked up about. This is like a Monday night. Well, this is what it was. People always talk about Civil War and all that stuff, right? And we're always talking in the cup here how Civil War is going to look a lot different than you think it is. And it's probably going to begin a lot different than you think it's going to begin, right? There's no, Fort Sumter and all that stuff. That's kind of a thing of the past. That's definitely a thing of the past. But I look at this Hurricane Helene response up in, Western North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee, a little bit in Virginia. You got your Appalachia up there. Now, it warms the heart that, the response that people were getting up there. People, coming out of their own pocketbooks, getting up there, giving relief. And I know some of these folks like, Tim Kennedy and stuff, that benefits them, but that's okay. They're helping people. I hope. Tim Kennedy's out there with his little group and they're getting food to people. And, you got NC Scout out there handing out those Baofeng radios and teaching people how to use them. I mean, that's some cool stuff, getting water out there. And then you have the reports of, FEMA stopping people, the authorities stopping people from bringing in supplies. I mean, my wife, experienced this when she tried to provide aid to some floods there in Texas. FEMA said, no, you can't bring this in. Well, what can we give it to you? No, take it away. We don't want it. And it was stuff like water and like wet wipes and, things that people actually needed. And it got me to thinking, Josh, it's like, what if it got to a point where there was an actual real life fisticuffs, Donnybrook, and you got Tim Kennedy or somebody high profile rolled up, arrested for trying to bring aid to people when the federal government can't provide it, the local government can't provide it. Somebody, or God forbid, somebody gets shot. That is the kind of thing you need to start worrying about. When the federal response or even the state response is so inept that private citizens are trying to respond and the inept responders are not allowing them to, that is where people are going to start. That could get ugly.
It absolutely, it absolutely can get ugly, especially in places like rural Appalachia. Like that is not the place. If you were the federal government, even the state government, that is not the place to go f around. You remember the stories of the tax collectors that would go out into into the hills and mountains and go, hey, it's time to go knock on, Hezekiah's door and get those taxes. And man, that we never saw that tax collector ever again. He just disappeared in the mountains somewhere. Like
I nicked a census, man.
that's right. Yeah.
That's a
Yeah,
good boy.
that's not the place to, that's not the place to go messing around. And it's another one of those things, you know, the government has a credibility problem. And they talk about how, well, we can't believe that people don't trust the government institutions. We can't believe that, this is bad. We got to fix this. We got to be accountable. It's like, here's a great opportunity for you to work on fixing that accountability problem that you have and that perception problem that you have, and the lack of trust that people have in our government institutions. Here's a great opportunity for you to fix it. Find those civilians who are out there helping. Like you said, these folks are paying out of their own pockets. And I see some of this stuff every day. Guys are flying their personal helicopters, coming out of their own pockets, flying supplies back and forth from central North Carolina over into the mountains. There is a fob, right? And it blows my mind that, when they said we have fob, and I forget the name of it, is up and running. It's like, we have a forward operating base in the United States of America. Like that it just sounds kind of wild when you think about it. But there's a fob out there full of civilians, and these guys are, everybody from, you know, country boys to former military. Just, I mean, they're, it's the bar scene from Star Wars, but they're out there living out of the backs of their vehicles, sleeping in the backs of their vehicles at night and helping people in need during the day. you know and that's, if you're the federal government, go in and empower them, make them part of the solution. Let them help when people, and they say this is not happening. It's absolute crap. It is happening. Now there's videos of, floating around on X of government officials stopping people, local sheriffs, even some of the local sheriffs. And this is, it harkens back to our, statements like, hey, your local sheriff election is critical. There's sheriffs stopping people from, trying to recover some of their personal belongings from, where their house is or used to be or whatever. And it's like, these people, winter is coming. Like, winter is coming to the mountains, and these people have nothing. But, and so the federal government continues to be inept. And I always say the government does two things well, and only two things. And it's, Ben Shapiro says this: points guns at people and takes people's money. That's the only two things that the government is good at. Everything else the government sucks at. Get out of the way, let the private sector work, let the private sector get in there and empower them. Elon Musk he's making it rain Starlink systems, in Western North Carolina. Had the FCC not canceled the contract that they had with Elon Musk and Starlink over purely political purposes, they canceled that contract. That would have already put a lot of Starlink systems into rural areas. And now, once again, we're playing catch up because the federal government wanted to be petty, and play politics instead of, again, helping people. So, but you're right, that is a flashpoint. It's those types of flashpoints that can ignite that larger powder keg, for sure.
Yeah, and it's just too easy, man. If you Trump, if you're listening, and the Department of Government Efficiency, Doge, that Elon Musk is going to run, which is awesome. If you want to keep your FEMA, right, and you want to keep that capability, quote unquote, there needs to be a private sector outreach, private sector liaison uh, division within FEMA, to where that part is built in to your response. It's like there's a central point of contact. Tim Kennedy, you want to come help? NC Scout, you want to come help? Reach out to my division, because Luke's going to run it. Reach out to my division, and I'll coordinate. I'll coordinate to get you in. I'll coordinate to get you out. And guess what else I'm going to do? I'm also going to reimburse you for what you did. Or at least a portion of it, something. But I guarantee you, they do not have that capability right now. Maybe they kind of do. Maybe they have, some PhD who's a SES who is supposed to be in charge of it, but it's just not working. It's like dude, it's disaster response 101. You figure out what capabilities you have, what resources you have, identify the weak, where you're coming up short. And that's where you hand it over to your private sector division, your private sector liaison division, say, what can you do for me? And then you go to the public and say, what can you do for us? We'll reimburse you. What do we got? Elon Musk,
Yeah.
you want to come in here, bring all these Starlinks? Cool. Yes. And we'll pay for it. You're going to front it, but we're going to give you your money back later. That's another thing, we were talking about, we talk about misinformation, all this stuff. It's like the $750 thing. Okay. There is money allocated to FEMA to rebuild and give people back a lot of the stuff that they lost. Not everything, but a lot. There's money allocated to rebuild. There's state funds for that. There's federal funds for that. So the way that $750 thing was handled, the messaging behind it is so inept. And I can't believe people have jobs and are getting paid, by the administration, by the campaigns, to not get out ahead of that. Because the $750 is a token to get people to buy groceries, things like that, whatever they need. That's not all there is. There's more coming. But they didn't get out in front of that until today, when Joe Biden had his press conference. They finally were trying to play catch up with the $750. No one messaged that. It's like, how stupid are you people? You got to get out in front of it. And the Trump campaign and Republicans are going to pounce on that $750. That's not going to, this person just lost their home. That's good messaging, right? May not be true,
No.
Not 100% true, but it's good messaging. Which, by the way, I'm looking at this video right now, Josh. It's freaky. Tampa Bay, there's like no water in Tampa Bay right now. Like the bay itself.
Yeah.
It's sucked out all that water.
Yep.
And this cameraman is just trying to pan out as far as he can, but the light's not reaching out, and there's no water in the bay. That's spooky, dude.
This happened in, I want to say 2017. I could be wrong. All the water, another hurricane, all the water got sucked out. People were walking like a mile or two out into Tampa Bay. No water, no nothing. People don't realize Tampa Bay is very shallow. When you really talk about bays, it's very shallow, and that's why the storm surge, they were concerned about it, because it's shallow. There's nowhere for that water to go, and all that stuff's going to go up on land. But it's wild when you see that, and you're like, dude, there's no water here as far as you can see when they're supposed to be. That's pretty wild. Better not mess around though. You go out too far, you start sinking.
Well,
that water's coming back.
It's gonna come back, and you see stuff like this, and kind of going far afield here, but that's okay. It's Culper's Canteen Cup. We like to go far afield. There's no water in the bay, and wow, that's crazy. You and I see that, we're like, that's insane, right? But you've seen it before. You've seen it on TV, whatever. But you go back to the Old Testament times where nobody ever seen anything like that before. That's right. A miracle of God, because what we're witnessing now is nature. And if you believe in God, it's like, that's the power of God and nature. He put that in place. Now, if you want to talk about creating hurricanes, God can do that. He already did it. Every hurricane that came in, God created it, in a passive kind of way, however you look at it. But you look at crossing the Red Sea, for instance. There are, incidents that happen in nature that, holy crap, I didn't know that could happen. But here it is. There's dry land where there's water. My entire life, there's been water right here, and now it's dry. that would be seen back before television, back before there was written word, you know, that's a miracle,
Yep.
right? That's a miracle. You got to attribute that to God. That's when I read the Old Testament about the flood, like, and the parting of the Red Sea. I'm like, it's all just, you got to take it into context. Is it a
Yeah.
miracle? Did God reach down from heaven, put, the godly hands in the Red Sea and part it with his hands and all? No, no. But God created the conditions to where something like that could happen that benefited people at the time, whatever. I've always said this about the flood, like Noah's flood, right? How big was Noah's world back then? 100
Exactly.
miles in every direction, maybe? That was the earth to them.
Yep.
Because this was before, it's before, you travel long distances and things like that. Sure, people were nomadic, but they weren't that, I mean, their worlds were pretty small, especially they lived near a river or some kind of food source. World was small. You don't need to move. Everything's good here. We got food, we got water, whatever. So Noah's world was small. So I doubt for a second that Noah's entire earth was flooded? No, it absolutely flooded. And if you listen to what's his name, shoot, I can't remember his last name. He's been on Rogan a few times about, you know, he's talking about the flood myth and all that stuff. What's interesting about the flood myth across cultures is that almost every culture has a flood myth.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, something happened. And I think his theory is that an asteroid or whatever hit like the North Pole, flash melted a bunch of water, and just about everybody who lived on Earth experienced a flood. Because people back then were living closer to not so far. Graham Hancock. I almost said Hancock, but I was like, no, that's not right. It sounds kind of phallic. And Josh is going to call me gay if I said Hancock. But but yeah, it's just interesting, man. I don't know. Kind of went on a tangent there, but seeing things like the water being pulled out of that bay is absolutely amazing. And wow.
Power of nature, man. Power of God. I'm glad you brought up the that tangent though, because it's important because kind of go with the same thing. People are like, the entire world didn't flood. It's like, okay, yeah, you're probably right. Like the entire world did not flood. Noah's world flooded. What Noah and everybody else knew the world to be then absolutely flooded. And so and like you said, every civilization, ancient civilization, has stories about a flood. Because where do people live? Primarily near sources of water. Guess what happens when you live near a source of water? At some point, it's going to flood. It might not flood during your lifetime, but it's going to. Right? It's just so yeah. It's wild though, man. It is wild to see that the tidal. When we lived in Alaska, the tide difference between low and high tide was astronomical. I mean, it was, you might have at low tide low tide might be 50, 60, 80 feet, right? So you can kind of get out on the mud flats, especially down near the coast. But what would happen when people get out on the mud flats and they find a soft spot, they'd sink and they get up to like their knees. And you know how it is, man. Dude, you get stuck in some mud, like that stuff is just, I mean, it's like cement and it's really, really hard to get out. Tide to come back in and they drown. Because they couldn't get out. So you got people who die every year up there in the mud flats because they get out there and they get sucked in the mud just like up to their calves or their knees. They can't get out, man. That tide comes back in and drowns them.
Being a child of the 70s, that kind of reminds me of something. Being a child of the 70s, watching Gilligan's Island and, some of these other shows we'd watch. I can't, like Land of the Lost, things like that.
Shaka.
In my adult life, I look back and I guess as a kid, I thought that quicksand would be a lot bigger problem in my life than it actually is. Every show get caught in quicksand. It's like, I've never. The only incident of quicksand I've ever like kind of seen, I mean, this wouldn't even kill. They didn't kill the guys, But you remember early on in the Iraq invasion when those British SAS guys were landed on the bank of some river and they started getting
Yeah,
sucked down? That's that mud you were talking about. It's like those guys
yeah,
couldn't move. They were getting sunk waist deep and they were like, little help here. I mean, it was bad. And the more they struggled, the deeper. I guess that is quicksand. I guess.
yeah. I guess it would be quicksand. You saw it on the show, like you said. You always saw it on the shows, um, and that's what I thought it would look like. I've never seen anything that looked like that, and I've never, the only quicksand I've seen is kind of like, again, what people, near bodies of water, you kind of get down, you're like, oh man, it's muddy, but it's not soupy, but it's just thick enough that, when you sink down in it, it's hard to get back out of. I
Yeah.
guess that would be it. Um, but yeah, and then after that, man, you just try and lean forward, make yourself as flat as stick your arms out, try and make yourself as wide as possible to get some surface contact, to keep from going all the way in. But yeah, I thought it would be a lot bigger problem too. And as many times as we practiced to stop, drop, and roll, I thought I was going to be on fire a lot more as well.
Yeah.
In addition to on fire in quicksand, I was like, that's going to be my life, on fire in quicksand. Um,
And getting kidnapped. Get,
getting kidnapped,
you
getting
know,
snatched.
getting,
Yeah.
that was a thing for those of y'all who are like a little younger. We're not exaggerating. Like the quicksand, there weren't PSA, there weren't public service announcements on quicksand or anything. But there were public service announcements about stop, drop, and roll. There were like little jingles on Saturday morning, cartoons about if you're ever on fire, stop, drop, and roll. Whatever it was. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, and that's sunk in. It's like, okay, all right, mental note. Another one was if anyone's ever, pulls over and offers you candy to get in their car to stranger danger. No, no, no.
Yep.
I mean, it was like Saturday morning cartoons. There were PSAs about being on fire, being abducted, uh, getting lost in the desert because I lived in Phoenix when I was really young, and there were PSAs like little cartoons about getting lost in the desert.
Wow.
Because, dude, Josh, it would happen all the time. Roger would tell you. I bet it still happens. People will pull over near a highway or near a road. They'll pull over, walk out into the desert. They'll die 200 meters from their car because they'll get lost. Seriously.
Holy moly.
Yeah, and the folks from Arizona, you understand, every year you'll hear about somebody who died 200 meters from their car because they just got
Wow.
turned around. One cactus looked like the same one, and they'll walk in circles for hours and die of dehydration within hours. Crazy,
Holy
man.
moly.
Yeah, life
That's
was pretty scary as kids, man.
yeah. That's so my wife's cousins, they live out in Kansas, and one of them, been on. Everybody remembers the farmers, Brandon and Jared, and they talked about, every once in a while they'll have a young kid, who will wander out into the cornfield and get lost in the cornfield. And the next thing you know, man, it's hands across their county in this cornfield looking for this kid, because once you get into the corn, you don't know which way is which. And out there, I mean, it's miles and miles and miles. You might have a cornfield that's miles and miles long. Little toddler, little kid gets out there and gets lost. I got lost in the woods
I was about
once.
to ask that. I was about to ask, have you ever been like truly lost? Like where you
Yeah,
were like, I don't know.
yeah. So I was I wasn't driving yet. I might have been 14 or 15. My dad and I were in the woods and we were hunting, and we were down in this river bottom, and river bottoms all look the same. You get down into the river bottom, it all looks the same. And it was overcast, so I couldn't, you didn't have the sun to navigate, try and help you figure out, which direction you were facing or whatever. So we were at the truck, and we were at a bend in the road, and I forget exactly which cardinal directions the road ran, but let's say the road was L shaped, and let's say that that road ran, it ran north, and then it bit back the L, bottom of it, it bent back to the east. All right. So I left to go down, to the actual river itself, and then I was going to handrail the river, for maybe quarter, maybe half a mile down to where and I knew there was a clearing, a little bit, and it was a bed down area um, that I've been to before for deer, and so I was like, all right, I'm going to go down here. Well, I got down there, and it was like, okay, there was really nothing, nothing to see. There was no deer there, and it was starting to get. I knew it was a little later in the afternoon. I was like, I'm going to head back. Well, I thought that I was kind of in that northeast quadrant. And so I was like, well, I'll just walk south and I'll hit the road, right? Because I'm gonna hit the bend in the L, the bottom of the L piece. I'm gonna hit that. I'll just walk south and I'll hit the road. So I kept walking and walking. I was like, man, really should have hit that road by now. I didn't think I was this far in. So I kept walking. I was like, okay, well, as long as I don't cross the river, I know I'm going the right direction, right? So I had that terrain feature. I couldn't go north very far because I was going to wind up in the river. And, it's kind of like when you went to PLDC and did land navs, like, hey, if you hit this, you've gone too far. So I was like, okay, that's my backstop. You know, I know I can't go north, across the river. What I didn't know was I had drifted to the west, right? And I was walking and walking, but I was paralleling. I was basically handrailing the long part of the L, thinking that I was, northeast of it, you know, but I was not. I was west of it, but I was kept walking south because I was like, man, I like this road should be here. And I stopped and I made the error of starting to look for other terrain features, right? Instead of marking where I stopped, I just started like, well, let me go look over here and see if I can, let me go up on this little rise over here and see if I can see down into that bottom to, see what's down there. And then you start looking around, you're like, I don't know which way is which now. Like, I don't know which cardinal direction I'm facing. And so this went on for, I mean, I was in there for a couple hours. Like, I was lost. Like, I just legit did not know where I was. And by sheer luck, I heard a truck and I started walking the direction that I heard the truck and I popped back out on another road. And at that point, I was like, okay, well, I found a road, so I'm good. And then, I kind of figured out where I was and, where dad was at the truck. And, it took me probably about another hour to get to it. But, I never told my dad I got lost.
Yeah,
I got
good
back to the
call.
truck. He goes, were you coming from that direction? I was like, oh, well, when I got in there, I took up, I went up a little bit to, go check this other bed down area that I'd seen, before, then I worked my way back. He was like, oh, okay. All right. Yeah. I didn't, I didn't tell him,
Yeah.
like, I've actually been lost for the last 3 hours, like almost in panic mode.
That panic
So
mode's the worst,
yeah,
I've always kind of prided myself on land navigation, especially early on in the Army. I
yep,
was pretty good at it. Uh, old school, map, you know, add, subtract, all that. I'm pretty good at it. In fact, one time at NTC, you ever been to NTC?
yep,
You have,
yeah,
really, for with your unit in Alaska?
yep.
Okay. So, we were doing a big movement, right? We were moving, and at night, dude, all you do, there's no land nav. It's you are staying on the bumper of the person in front of you because it is pitch black and you can barely see it because you're doing what do they call it? Those night lights on the Humvee. What do they call those?
Blackout.
The blackouts. Yeah. You can't see nothing. So you're just following the person in front of you. And then all of a sudden, our convoy comes to a halt, right? And at some point, some dude was too far away from the bumper of the person in front of him, some 88 Mike, and just didn't follow him. And we ended up out in the middle of the desert. NTC is in the middle of Death Valley. It's the desert, dude. There is nothing out there. And so anyway, he stops, and the warrant, Chief Garcia, he gets out, and he was real big on land nav, and he gets out, and we're like, "What's going on?" It's like, "I guess I got separated." I just kept driving, and we were driving straight into Op 4, straight into Op 4. And you could actually kind of see, because the next morning Op 4 was going to attack. Everybody knew it. You could actually see the columns of dust, a few kilometers, to our south. And Chief's like, okay, give me the map. So we get the map, we spread it out, and he goes, okay, Jones, do what I taught you. So we start doing intersection and resection. Okay, there's that mountain. Okay, let's look at that. There's that. Okay, there's that mountain over there. There's that. Okay, shoot an azimuth there, intersection, resection. Here's exactly where we are on the map. No GPS, no nothing. And
Yep.
these 88 mics were looking at us like cavemen who had seen fire for the first time. And Chief is all like, he's all proud of himself because, he had taught us the right way and, all that stuff. And we ended up getting out of there. So that built a lot of confidence, right?
Yeah,
I could tell
sure.
where I am right in the middle of the desert just from a couple of terrain features. And I go to PLDC and I ace the PLDC's primary leadership development course. When you make sergeant, you've got to go to PLDC, and there's a land nav course. And on Bragg, did you go on Bragg?
Yeah.
It was easy. That land nav course was so easy. It was ridiculous. I actually took a nap about 20 meters off one of the stops. I was just like, whatever. But dude, my point is, the only 2 times I've been lost in my life where I'm like, I have no idea where I am. I mean, I know what state I'm in right now. The only 2 times were on Fort Bragg. We went to another land nav course, and I had my squad with me and everything, Josh. It was so embarrassing. And I got lost because I did something wrong. And you know how those land nav courses are, you got to go to one point, then the other, then the other.
Yeah.
I went to one point, and it was the wrong point. It was a point, but it wasn't the one
It
we were
was not
supposed to be
yours.
at, and it's not numbered or anything. And I'm like, oh shit! I was like, we're screwed because now I'm completely lost. We have the map and everything, but I thought I was over here. It was like the captain, what's his name from Band of Brothers? There's not supposed to be a fence here. Sobel. Why is there a fence here? There's not supposed to be a fence here. It was so embarrassing, bro. I just one little mistake.
Yeah.
You don't subtract or you don't add, and you're just a little bit off of your azimuth by like 4 degrees, and you're really screwed.
Yeah.
And then another time I was with, you remember Chief Smith?
Yeah.
What was his first name?
Chris.
Yeah. Another time was with Chris, and he let us do the land nav. And to my credit, I guess I wasn't the one who was, I wasn't the guide, but at the same time, I was right up there with the guide. And we got to a point where it's like, yeah, dude, we don't know where we are. Both times on Fort Bragg, all the other times until GPS came around. GPS is easy. I mean, It's hard to get lost if you know what you're doing. But yeah, so I know what it's like to be lost. I mean, but not lost where that panic sets in. It's like, I may not find civilization again. I mean, I don't know if I've been that lost. If I have, I can't recall it.
Yeah. Yeah. I was legit lost, and I was kind of like, it was December, and I was sweating. Like, I was sweating buckets. Because I had that panic had started setting. Again, I was 14 or 15, and I was like, I might have to spend the night in the woods, all by myself with nothing but my shotgun. Which, I mean, at the end of the day, it was like, that would have there would have been a search party, but
well,
it's
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I say everybody should be able to to land navigate, even if you should. Everybody should. It's a life saving skill. And like you said, it doesn't matter. It's not a skill that only people in the military need. There you go. It's not just the skill that people in the military need. Like you said, you brought it up. Like, people die 200 meters from their car in Arizona. Right? Everybody should be able to navigate without the aid of electronics. Just terrain associate, and it's just something as simple as taking a look at, we're going to go to Washington D.C. On vacation, something like that. It's like, just take a look at it, orient yourself to those terrain features where you can see them, and you say, okay, I know that if I am walking downhill in Washington D.C., generally speaking, I'm headed south because everything slopes to the river, right? And the river's on the south side of DC. And find out how the streets are laid out. If they're even numbered, if they're lettered streets and you're in Washington D.C., you're either walking east or west. If they're numbered streets, you're walking north or south, and everything starts off the capital and stuff. It just fear and being able to train associate again. You might not be able to. All right, here's my 10-digit grid, but I know when I see the Lincoln Memorial, I know where that is in relation to the city, so I know kind of which way I'm facing. Just stuff like that.
Now, I will say this, in all fairness, in all transparency, there's a difference between being lost and being temporarily disoriented. Because if you sit here and tell me that you haven't been Purple 3-6, that means completely lost in a city, and you're like, okay, I know I'm in Seattle right now, but I have no idea how to get back to this particular point. And I have been disoriented before. You temporarily disoriented where it's like, dude, I couldn't tell you which way north is to save my life right now because it's in Seattle. Everything is weird in Seattle. The sky is gray. There's no sun. Where
Yeah.
am I right? It's not just Seattle. We've all been temporarily disoriented, but being familiar with the area and the terrain features and the landmarks and things like that, it can get you back on track real quick. Josh, you listen to Sean Ryan's show, right?
Yep.
And I think a lot of our folks do too. He's had a lot of people on there, and he's had a lot of Delta operators on there. And I think it's safe to say when Tom Satterley's on there and Shrek, have you listened to the one with Shrek yet?
Yeah.
Oh my God. We could talk about that one. But I think that it's safe to say the cat's out of the bag, that, the first big hurdle to, the selection to get into the infamous Delta Force is a land nav course. It's just a long land nav course where no one's helping you out. And apparently that's a huge discriminator. And all it is navigating from one point to another just by yourself. There's something to be said that the premier, advanced infantry course in the history of the world starts out with the big discriminator being a land navigation course. There's something to be said for that. Can you handle yourself? Can you tell where you are? Can you deal with being temporarily disoriented for a little while under extreme pressure where your only guidance is just do the best you can? When do I have to be there? Well, just when you get there, but make sure it's the quickest you can.
Make sure it's on time.
What's on time? Well, just the best you can.
Yep. And then when you get there and they go, all right, and all they say is have a good one.
Did I do good?
Did
I do good?
It's yeah, and it's, again, I know some people who, generally speaking, I can drive. If I drive somewhere twice, if I drive to a location twice in a new area that I'm not familiar with, all I need to do is drive there twice and I'm good. I don't need a GPS. I'm like, I can navigate my way back to that place. And I have a fairly good sense of direction, whether it's in the city or, out in the rural areas, but I've absolutely been temporarily disoriented, in places that I'm not familiar with. But again, that's just one of those things. I've always been good with maps, and I credit it a lot to road trips with my family when I was a kid, and I pulled out Dad's big old Rand McNally map book and just looked at maps to see where all these different places are, because there was nothing else to do. There was no iPad or, no phone or anything. It was like, well, I've annoyed my sisters. We've already had one fight. Dad already threatened to pull the car over. So I got to figure something out. You can only play the ABC game so long. And then it was like, well, I guess we're just going to read the Rand McNally map book and, see where all these places that I want to visit one day are. And after that, it just, kind of helps out.
I guess, I'm rewatching a show called, this is where the Alzheimer's starts setting in, the early onset Alzheimer's. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Now I got it. I distracted myself long enough. I'm watching a show called The Terror, Terror. It's a BBC thing. It's about these two British ships. They were looking for the Northwest Passage back in the day, a way to get from Great Britain to China, because back then it was all about tea. It was all about the tea trade. It was like making it to China and getting from Great Britain to China. Back then, there was no Suez Canal. There definitely was no Panama Canal. And it's
Nope.
like, dude, if we go, north, if we can figure out a passage north, just to cut through all that stuff, go around Alaska and go down there to China, that is the ticket, because we got 5 good months where we can do that. So even if you can make one leg of the trip shorter, go through that Northwest Passage and then, go the long way back, that's economical. It's good. So these two ships got stuck in the ice and all this stuff. And I read Shackelford's book, or the book about Shackelford getting stuck in Antarctica. You read that one?
Yeah, I want to read that. I want to read that one, man.
Brutal. But I look at like Cook and Magellan and all these people. It's like, sure, they were tough. Of course they were tough. But what separated them was navigation, man. The navigation was key. I mean, when you're talking distances like that at speeds that they were going, which were very slow, it's all about navigation. It's just crucial. And one thing I'm noticing about myself is that my navigation is stunted because of GPS, because of Google Maps. All of our navigation is stunted. We're losing that skill. The kids don't even have it. They don't have it at all. It's all Google Maps. So it's like, even with myself, I can notice it, and I'm trying to get away from it. I showed Josh earlier some maps I've been printing out, U.S. Geological Survey. They have free maps out there. If you just figure out how to print them right, I like having maps on hand, because I'm a mapophile like Josh. I love maps. I love it.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of maps, just to put up on the wall. But yeah, I need to get back to that, get back to the old ways of doing things, because yeah.
I used to want a 1/50,000 map of everywhere I was stationed.
100%.
And I was going to frame them and hang them up on the walls. But my office isn't that big, and my office is the only room where I'm allowed to hang up stuff on the walls. The rest of the house is forbidden for my decorations. But yeah, dude, when you talk about, I haven't read Shackleton's book. I want to read Shackleton's book on Antarctica. But you talk about any of the explorers, not just not just them. I mean, you take just Hillary, right? You take a look at what people use and what people go through to summit Everest today. And Sir Edmund Hillary was like, "Hold my beer, I'll be right back." It's like, I'm going to go do this thing in a wool blanket, and some gloves. People now are like, "Oh, I need my my $1,000 North Face zip up suit and oxygen and all these other things." And the old explorers, man, they're like, "No, I don't need that. I'm good."
Alzheimer's check. Who was not Shackleton? Who was Hillary's Sherpa?
Tenzing Norgay.
Boom.
I probably said his name wrong.
No, very good. Very good.
Yeah. I've read a lot of books on Everest. Then I nerd out on, I don't know why, but it's fascinating to me. Like John Krakauer's In the Thin Air about the 96 disaster on Everest. And then there was just this other, I forget the name of the show, like Above the Limit or something. And it was, they featured Mountain Madness and a couple other companies that are running expeditions on Everest. And, they film crews followed the teams up, to the summit and back, and, while they're in base camp and everything. And I think that stuff I think it's fascinating. I've read a lot. But you think about, though, like the stones that people like Shackleton and Cook and Magellan and Balboa, think about the stones those dudes had in Columbus. Think about the stones those dudes had to do what they did. Like that.
It wasn't just getting rich. That is not it. That's part of it. But to set out, like, I don't know. not fascinated, but I do enjoy reading and watching shows about what it was like living on those ships. And maybe for the crew, it was about money. I got to provide. Maybe it was about that. But for the leaders of the expedition, they're just something different. You know, they're
Yeah,
true explorers. I mean, true adventurers. And you know, you know, it's funny. I maybe the universe is aligning, you know, thoughts and things like that. But I've been seeing a lot of Everest stuff lately, and I've always been kind of fascinated with Everest, K2, things like that. But I don't think I would ever do it because it's too touristy now. It's like, well,
yeah,
if some doctor from freaking, you know, Albuquerque does it, it's like, what's so special about it anymore? You know? But it is still is fascinating. I saw something the other day where there is a body on Everest. They can't be retrieved because it's too dangerous. It's too high up. But there's a body laying there. It's got yellow boots on, and it's like it's a guide point, and they call it yellow
yeah.
boots. They call it yellow boots. It's a body with these boots sticking out of the ice. It's called yellow boots. Okay, we've reached yellow boots. We're gonna keep going. I don't know, man. You know, when it comes to altitude, I'm pretty good with altitude. Pretty good. In fact, I enjoy it. I enjoy doing stuff at altitude. I always have. But there is a point where the altitude gets you, and just out of nowhere. Like I ski. I used to ski a lot. I used to climb a lot. But there have been a few points where I'm skiing the same slopes I skied forever. I'm hiking the same mountain I've hiked 20 times, not 20, a dozen times. But sometimes the altitude just gets you. Maybe that, you know, maybe you didn't eat right the week before, maybe you didn't have enough water. But sometimes, and it just strikes you out of nowhere, the altitude gets you, and there's nothing you can do. It takes over your brain. And there's a few. I think Darren listening has probably been in these similar situations where your brain starts playing tricks with you. It starts shutting your body down. It's like you can't go any further. You're done.
Sure.
You start getting pain where you never had pain before in your life. It's just altitude is a crazy thing. And I think about Edmund Hillary, and it's like no oxygen. I how did you do that? Because that's twice as high as I've ever been. You know, I can't even imagine.
Got built different, man.
Yeah,
I went
tougher.
to yeah, I went to La Paz, Bolivia, um, a few times for work, and I was stationed in Puerto Rico at the time, and so I went from basically 30 feet above sea level to 13,000 feet above sea level. When you land in La Paz, you land up on the Altiplano, which is up above La Paz. La Paz sits in a big old valley, and dude, they hit every your room came with an oxygen tank. When you got to the hotel and checked in, there was an oxygen tank in your room because you know people coming from 30,000, 30 feet to 13,000 feet. That's significant. In 8 hours, you're like, whoo. Man, you get off the plane and you're like, oh man, I'm fine. And you're like, hey, let's go walk around downtown, and check it out and go to the market and buy some souvenirs, stuff like that. And you start walking, you get like half a block, and you're like, whew, hold on, give me a minute. Like I gotta stop. And you're like, what is going on? And then you feel lightheaded, and you kind of feel like you're drunk a little bit, and you realize you're like, oh shit, man, that's right. We're at 13,000 feet. Like this is bananas. It's absolutely bananas. They also had coca tea that they would offer everybody. Of course, we couldn't drink it, but it was supposed to help with the altitude sickness. Um,
And it probably does
you know,
help. Those people have been
oh
doing that a
yeah,
long time. They figured that shit out, you know,
yeah, dude.
1,000 years ago. This coca
Yep,
leaves is pretty good stuff. You know what we should do?
yeah,
We should refine it and sell it to dumb Americans who will pay.
yeah.
But
We'll cut it with some bleach and a couple other chemicals, and then they'll pay a lot of money for it.
so
Um,
tell us about your trip, dude. Tell us about your trip.
so we went to Talladega. Uh, you know, my dad, my dad's a huge NASCAR fan. Always has been. Everything that I know about NASCAR, I learned from my dad watching it because every Sunday he watched the race when they were running. It was church, then home, beer, NASCAR, and So he's always loved it, and I kind of got into it there for a little while when I was a kid. You couldn't help it, like guys like Dale Earnhardt. You're like, who's this guy out here with the big old push broom mustache? That's bumping and out there shoving people, moving people around, winning races, something like that. You're like, it's kind of badass. Um, and so anyway, but I never got into NASCAR to the point where I was like, oh, this person's my driver, and this, that, and the other, and everything. And I really, didn't keep up with it. Uh, once I joined the military, because I wasn't there on Sundays with my dad watching it. And yeah, I've had friends. We have some listeners who are really, really into NASCAR. They're NASCAR fans. Ryan. Well, both Ryans. You in Northern Virginia. Especially one. He's big NASCAR guy. Goes to races and stuff. Anyway, so one of my dad's dreams has been to go to Talladega. Right, it's the biggest track, and it is one of the biggest races of the year. Um, and so my older sister rented an RV, nice RV in the infield at Talladega. We got garage passes to go, meet some of the drivers, get autographs, stuff like this. And my dad was like, it was like a kid in a candy store, and he really loved it, and he was glad that the wife and I were there and everything. So it was my first NASCAR race, like actual like NASCAR race. Um, and I sent you guys some of the pictures. Some of it you expect, right? You're like, okay, it's NASCAR. There's some good old boys. They banned the Confederate flag from all the tracks now, so you can't have Confederate flags anymore. But there's always, there's the "Don't Tread on Me" flags, and there was, dude, there was a ton of Trump flags. I did not see one Harris Waltz anything, shockingly, and so it was great. As far as like the race goes, man, dude, when you have 40 something cars come past you four wide on the track at 185 miles an hour, like you feel it. Because we could see the track from our RV, but we decided to go watch the Sunday race, which is the big one from the stands. And we had seats that were 3 rows up off the track. And so, dude, those cars coming by, like, I mean, you feel it, dude. And it was like, oh shit, like this is pretty awesome. Um, get your blood going, and there's some America there and everything. But I will say this. Talladega, and I don't know if this is indicative of every race. I was talking to Ryan a little bit about it. The nightlife, it was a little overboard. It was a little overboard, right? You expect, dude, so they have this, they call it Talladega Boulevard, right? And it's in the infield and it's a street. And after like 7 p.m., you can't drive down it or no golf carts, nothing, walking only. And they have any type of, you want to get into some debauchery, they got it, right? I mean, it was, and you expect some of it, right? You expect some, there's a bunch of dudes walking around, they got handfuls of beads, right? And it's like Mardi Gras. You're like, okay, I know what I got to do to get some of those. I mean, I took my shirt off multiple times and nobody gave me any beads. I don't know why. And, but there was also like, some adult toys. They had out on a bench, and like they would tell, ladies walking by, they'd be like, you sit on it for 3 minutes, I'll give you some beads.
Are you serious?
I shit you not, dude. And I was just like,
Good
okay.
God.
It's like, okay, really? Like, really? And people had their kids there. Dude, people rented 2 camping lots, 2 lots. They had their RV on one, and the next one, the one next to them, they set up like this stage with stripper poles on it. And people had their kids there. And and those parties raged into the middle of the night. And it was just like, man, dude, there was no expectation to go there and it'd be like, okay, hey guys, it's 10 o'clock. You need to pipe down. But at the same time, you're like, really? And I sent you the pictures of the flags, right? That somebody had flying off their RV.
Good Lord, yeah.
And that's in an area like the RV next to them had a bunch of kids. And you're like, really? Is there like have some decorum? Like if you're gonna do that stuff, like, hey man, after midnight till 3 in the morning when there's no kids around, okay, whatever. But it was a little over the top for me, and I was just like, that piece of it, the racing stuff, the NASCAR, the driver, like that was super cool. Had a great time, or a really good time hanging out with my dad, but the nightlife stuff, man, I was just like, yeah, this is not for me because I'm not 20 years old anymore, at some college keg party, which was 100 times tamer than what this was. It was like it was legit like The Walking Dead meets Mad Max is sprinkled with meth. Like that's
And
what it
Wolf
was
of
like.
Wall Street.
And Wolf of Wall Street. Like dude, it was a little overboard.
They should have
So
never gave you honkies money.
that's right. Yeah.
Dude.
So, but at the end of the day, I had a great time with my dad, my sister, and my brother-in-law. It was a lot of fun. Um, you know, but
So it's the
yeah,
redneck version of a pride parade.
pretty much.
Yeah. But in their defense, because that sounds like totally not my scene. And kudos to your wife for putting up to that with that, because I don't know how long my wife would have lasted with something like that. But in their defense, those crazy debauched rednecks, I would rather them be coming to my defense or to save me than the folks at a pride parade. Put it to that way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the folks at NASCAR, like those are the people who win your nation's wars.
Oh yeah.
Like that, those are the people who win your nation's wars. And I'm fine. And again, at the end of the day, man, like a lot of those are my people, right? I mean, a lot of those people are Florida Panhandle people. Um,
Yeah.
and again, like I'm 99% of it, like I was good with. It's like, yeah, man, this is, it's fine. It's whatever. It was just like, when you have a bench full of adult toys
Yeah.
sitting there, and you're getting you're trying to talk women into taking their shorts off and sitting on these things for 3 minutes just so they can get some beads, and there's 10-year-old kids standing right there watching. Like that's a little okay, that's like really, like that's probably a little much.
Yeah. Those rednecks
And you're like,
there needs to be controls on them, man. Controls are a good thing, man. You let somebody go completely retard, you never go full retard. And they are allowed, it sounds to me like they are allowed to go full retard, and that's redneck full retard. What you see in these pride parades, that's their full retard. It's like, no, just
yeah,
just take
and
it down
it's
a notch.
yeah, it was like, hey man, like this, a little much. So
Ugh. So I'm watching
anyway,
this real quick. I mean, we're coming up on the end of time, but it just watching this video right now. I'm pausing for a second because there have been some videos of some dogs that have been like abandoned, in the path of the hurricane. And it's just like,
I know the one you're talking about.
well, there's two of them. There's the one
Oh
with the dog who has been chained to a pole.
yes,
And it's
God.
like, and then there's another one where this dog is just out on its own. It's just like, it's playing with its toy, like out in the middle of the street. It's got a little toy it's playing with. And it's like, that second one, it's like, maybe that dog just got loose. It's like, we've got a choice. We can either wait for the dog or I can take my family of 5 out of here. And it's like, well, it's a family of 5 that I get that. But
Sure.
man, but at the same time, these are still people. Like I look at my dogs and it's like, that's a commitment.
Yes.
It's not a human. It's not a human. They're not humans. But at the same time, that's my property. That's my responsibility. And that's a life. So, well, I'm going to do whatever I can. But I'm watching this video now and it's this guy's got horses there in that Florida area. And he's going to let his horses loose because, he's like, these wild animals, can, probably have a better chance than if I try to whatever. And what he's done is he has put that, really strong, permanent paint on the horses, and he's put his phone number on the horses. he's just going to
Oh,
let him
wow.
loose, and then hopefully, his horses will be recovered. Hey, I found, call this number, and I mean that's kind of cool. That's thinking outside the box. That's redneck thinking. Maybe not
That's
redneck, but
true.
that's country thinking. It's let these horses go. That let them trust their instincts. They'll probably make it because animals know run uphill. When the
I
water's
love
coming
it.
to run uphill. I don't know,
That's right.
man. It's just I'm hoping this thing is not as bad as because hurricane's big news, Josh. I mean, Cat 5, with meteorologists crying on air, that draws eyeballs, and I'm hoping it's been overplayed, and as it's hitting right now and tonight, I just hope
Yep.
it's not as bad. Yeah, man. So everybody, Gary got out of there though, dude. Gary knew when it was time to go. He did, and
Yeah.
I respect that. Florida guy. So yeah, man. Just prayers go out to those folks and hang in there. Is Florida strong?
Yep. I get it. Gary. Gary's mom's a little bit older, and doesn't get around. As good as she once was. So Gary, even though he's a Florida guy, and he doesn't have to give up his Salt Life sticker. Um, he made the right decision. If it was me and I was single and it was just me, I might actually be like, all right, let's see how it goes. Let's ride this baby out, because I think that's just how a lot of us are wired. Anyway, most of us are like Buffalo. You know, Buffalo. What happens when a storm comes? They run into it. They turn around and they just turn. Bison. They just run into the storm. Cows run from it. Buffalo just turn into it and be like, all right, let's do this. They go all Lieutenant Dan and Forrest Gump. On top of the shrimp boat with it. So we were talking about, before I close out. We were talking about explorers, and I'm going to throw out a quote here in a minute after I give a couple of shout outs. Real quick, just a couple of shout outs. Olivia, one of my daughters, her friend Olivia, actually listened, and she handed some stickers out to some of her high school friends, who hopefully start listening to us. But I told Olivia I'd give her a shout out in the last episode, and I forgot that Alzheimer's, but I didn't on this one. So Olivia, really appreciate you. Thanks for listening. Don and Linda in Atlanta, thanks for listening. John up in Northern Virginia, and Fred down in South Carolina. Hey, brother, we really appreciate you, taking the time to listen to us. So, real quick, we were talking about the Explorers. We won't record again before next Monday. Probably next Monday is Columbus Day, and so real quick for all of those anti-Columbus people out there who like to throw tarp on the man who made all of this possible. In his Lettera Rarissima, Christopher Columbus said, "Let those who are fond of blaming and finding fault while they sit safely at home ask, why did you not do thus and so? I wish they were on this voyage. I well believe that another voyage of a different kind awaits them, or our fate does not." Christopher Columbus is telling all his detractors to go kiss his ass, and so am I. Until next time, Canteeners, keep those canteen cups full. Those in the path of Hurricane Milton, you stay safe, and we will catch you on the next episode.